Hello dear viewer, and thank you for joining me on day 50 of reading the Bible together. Today we are reading Leviticus chapter 11 and 12 from the Old Testament, as well as Matthew chapter 27 verse 11 to 31 from the New Testament. Let's start. Leviticus chapter 11. Animals that may be eaten. The Lord gave Moses and Aaron the following regulations for the people of Israel. You may eat any land animal that has divided hooves and that also chews the cud, but you must not eat camels, rock badgers, or rabbits. These must be considered unclean. They chew the cud but do not have divided hooves. Do not eat pigs. They must be considered unclean. They have divided hooves but do not chew the cud. Do not eat these animals or even touch their dead bodies. They are unclean. You may eat any kind of fish that has fins or scales, but anything living in the water that does not have fins and scales must not be eaten. Such creatures must be considered unclean. You must not eat them or even touch their dead bodies. You must not eat anything that lives in the water and does not have fins and scales. You must not eat any of the following birds: eagles, owls, hawks, falcons, buzzards, vultures, crows, ostriches, seagulls, storks, herons, pelicans, cormorants, hoopoes, or bats. All winged insects are unclean, except those that hop. You may eat locusts, crickets, or grasshoppers, but all other small things that have wings and also crawl must be considered unclean. If you touch the dead bodies of the following animals, you will be unclean until evening. All animals with hooves, unless their hooves are divided, and they chew the cud, and all four-footed animals with paws. If you carry their dead bodies, you must wash your clothes, but you will still be unclean until evening. Moles, rats, mice, and lizards must be considered unclean. Whoever touches them or their dead bodies will be unclean until evening. And if their dead bodies fall on anything, it will be unclean. This applies to any article of wood, cloth, leather, or sacking, no matter what it is used for. It shall be dipped in water, but it will remain unclean until evening. And if their bodies fall into a clay pot, everything that is in it shall be unclean, and you must break the pot. Any food which could normally be eaten, but on which water from such a pot has been poured, will be unclean, and anything drinkable in such a pot is unclean. Anything on which the dead bodies fall is unclean. A clay stove or oven shall be broken, but a spring or a cistern remains clean, although anything else that touches their dead bodies is unclean. If one of them falls on seed that is going to be planted, the seed remains clean. But if the seed is soaking in water and one of them falls on it, the seed is unclean. If any animal that may be eaten dies, anyone who touches it will be unclean until evening. And if any of you eat any part of the animal, you must wash your clothes, but you will still be unclean until evening. Any of you who carry the dead body must wash your clothes, but you will still be unclean until evening. You must not eat any of the small animals that move on the ground, whether they crawl or walk on 4 legs or have many legs. Do not make yourselves unclean by eating any of these. I am the Lord your God, and you must keep yourselves holy, because I am holy. I am the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, so that I could be your God. You must be holy, because I am holy. This then is the law about animals and birds, about everything that lives in the water, and everything that moves on the ground. You must be careful to distinguish between what is ritually clean and unclean, between animals that may be eaten and those that may not. Leviticus chapter 12. The purification of women after childbirth. The Lord gave Moses the following regulations for the people of Israel. For 7 days after a woman gives birth to a son, she is ritually unclean, as she is during her monthly period. On the 8th day the child shall be circumcised. Then it will be 33 more days until she is ritually clean from her loss of blood. She must not touch anything that is holy or enter the sacred tent until the time of her purification is completed. For 14 days after a woman gives birth to a daughter, she is ritually unclean as she is during her monthly period. Then it will be 66 more days until she is ritually clean from her loss of blood. When the time of her purification is completed, whether for a son or daughter, she shall bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of the Lord's presence a 1-year-old lamb for a burnt offering, and a pigeon or a dove for a sin offering. The priest shall present her offering to the Lord and perform the ritual to take away her impurity, and she will be ritually clean. This then is what a woman must do after giving birth. If the woman cannot afford a lamb, she shall bring 2 doves or 2 pigeons, one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. And the priest shall perform the ritual to take away her impurity, and she will be ritually clean. Please feel free to pause the video here for time to reflect on what we have read. Let's continue. Matthew chapter 27, verse 11 to 31. Pilate questions Jesus. Jesus stood before the Roman governor, who questioned him. "Are you the king of the Jews?" he asked. "So you say," answered Jesus, but he said nothing in response to the accusations of the chief priests and elders. So Pilate said to him, "Don't you hear all these things they accuse you of?" But Jesus refused to answer a single word, with the result that the governor was greatly surprised. Jesus is sentenced to death. At every Passover festival, the Roman governor was in the habit of setting free any one prisoner the crowd asked for. At that time, there was a well-known prisoner named Jesus Barabbas. So when the crowd gathered, Pilate asked them, "Which one do you want me to set free for you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus called the Messiah?" He knew very well that the Jewish authorities had handed Jesus over to him because they were jealous. While Pilate was sitting in the judgment hall, his wife sent him a message. "Have nothing to do with that innocent man, because in a dream last night I suffered much on account of him." The chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask Pilate to set Barabbas free and have Jesus put to death. But Pilate asked the crowd, "Which one of these 2 do you want me to set free for you?" "Barabbas," they answered. "What then shall I do with Jesus called the Messiah?" Pilate asked them. "Crucify him," they all answered. But Pilate asked, "What crime has he committed?" Then they started shouting at the top of their voices, "Crucify him." When Pilate saw that it was no use to go on, but that a riot might break out, he took some water, washed his hands in front of the crowd and said, "I am not responsible for the death of this man. This is your doing." The whole crowd answered, "Let the responsibility for his death fall on us and on our children." Then Pilate set Barabbas free for them, and after he had Jesus whipped, he handed him over to be crucified. The soldiers make fun of Jesus. Then Pilate's soldiers took Jesus into the governor's palace, and the whole company gathered around him. They stripped off his clothes and put a scarlet robe on him. Then they made a crown out of thorny branches and placed it on his head, and put a stick in his right hand. Then they knelt before him and made fun of him. "Long live the King of the Jews," they said. They spat on him and took the stick and hit him over the head. When they had finished making fun of him, they took the robe off and put his own clothes back on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. Please feel free to pause the video here for time to reflect on what we have read. That's it for today, and I hope that you'll join me in the next video. Wishing you a graceful morning, day, or evening.